Welcome to the 2017 Classic Motor Rally School. My name is Simon Levere and I'm the Rally Master for the event. During the class today, you need to gain an understanding of what a rally is. We'll talk about the procedures we use in a rally. We'll spend most of our time talking about following the correct route, a little bit of time talking about staying on time, and throughout the presentation we'll discuss the terms and definitions used in the rally game. In very general terms, a rally is getting from point A to point B exactly on time. You'll be given a set of instructions similar to these, and while executing these instructions, we'll be maintaining an average speed. So for example, in these instructions, our first instruction tells us straight as possible at a blinker, and at that point we start averaging 25 miles an hour. As we continue through this section, executing these instructions and maintaining these average speeds, at some point we will pass a checkpoint where we will be timed. Based on our calculations and our measurements, if you go past that checkpoint exactly on time, you'll get no penalty points. But if you arrive early or if you arrive late, you'll get a penalty point for every second early or late. So let's talk about the procedures used in a rally. We have the odometer calibration, we have checkpoints and passage controls, and we have route controls. During the odometer calibration, which happens at the start of the event, it gives you an opportunity to measure our mile, the length of our mile as we measured it, to the length of your mile as you measured it. So for example, if our mile goes from this point to this point in 1 mile, but your odometer reads from here to here in 1 mile, and at our reference you're at 1.07, then you're going to need to drive faster than the given speeds to maintain time. So for example, if we were driving 60 miles an hour, we would go from here to here in 1 minute. But if you drove your indicated 60 miles an hour, you would go from here to here in 1 minute. So you're going to need to drive faster than 60 miles an hour because you need to be here after 1 minute to match our performance. There is math you can do to figure out how much to adjust your speeds by, but especially if this is your first or second event, I wouldn't put a lot of worry into calibrating your odometer. It's going to be more important to stay on course. As you're driving through these sections, the regularities, at some point you'll pass a checkpoint or a passage control. You'll see a passage control identified by a sign. You don't stop at a passage control. You would stop if it was a checkpoint. As you go past the passage control sign, the crew will time you, and that's how we determine whether you were early or late. Once you've passed the checkpoint, there's only one checkpoint per regularity section in this event, so beyond the checkpoint to the end of the section you can drive without as much concentration on staying on time. As it says here, stopping within sight of a checkpoint could subject you to be timed at that point, so you need to keep moving at all times. Also, there could be route controls. When you go past a route control sign, there should be a place to pull off and some kind of crew there. They'll give you additional information. Now, a route control could be an on-course control, where if you do not go to it, you receive a penalty. Or it could be an off-course control, where if you do go to it, you do receive a penalty. There's really no way to know from the sign whether it's on or off, so if you find a route control, you should go to it and maybe take your lumps or maybe celebrate being on course. After you get the information at the route control, you'll proceed on. There's usually a pause given for the route control, so you want to time when you got there so you can leave on time. Okay, so let's talk about route following, which is what we want to spend most of our time on. To understand route following, you need to know which roads are eligible, which signs and references can be used. We'll talk about the basic route instructions, and we'll talk about a set called the default route instructions. So, eligible roads. As it says here, all roads used on the rally are paved public through roads. All other roads, driveways, and parking lot entrances are considered to not exist and must not be counted or considered when executing route instructions. At any intersection, the route upon which you arrive is not an eligible route unless you are instructed to execute a U-turn. So in this example, you're approaching from the base here. When you get up here, there's only one legal route to follow, and that would be to the right. So for all intents and purposes, this road to the left that you can't legally turn onto doesn't exist. Here's another example. You're approaching from the base. You get up here. The road straight ahead is not a paved public through road, so therefore it doesn't count. So at this point, you're going to proceed to the left. Here's a real-world example. You're coming up this road. You can see the road straight ahead is indicated as a dead end. So for the purposes of the rally, that road does not exist. So let's talk about route instructions. Route instructions have actions, and they have references, some of which are defined. And then many times we'll use a sign as the reference, so we need to discuss what signs are eligible. Here's a basic route instruction, left at Main Street. So left is the action, it's what we're going to do, and Main Street is the reference, which is where we're going to do it. So some of the actions you'll do at different references. You could have an acute left or an acute right, which is a turn in that direction of obviously more than 90 degrees. You could have a bare left or a bare right, which is a turn in that direction of obviously less than 90 degrees. You could be told to change your average speed or cast at a reference. You could be instructed to go left, which is a left turn of any angle. You could be instructed to observe a reference. The thing to keep in mind in observe is it's not just a matter of seeing it, but you have to both see it and pass it. You could be told to pause at a reference, which is just adding that time into the calculations. You could be told to go right, or you could be told to go straight as possible at a reference. Those are the majority of the actions you're going to do. Some of the defined references. We have an op, which is an opportunity in that direction. So for example, the instruction could say left first op, and you would turn left at your first opportunity. We refer to a signal, which is a traffic light. We refer to a stop, which is a red octagonal stop sign. We refer to a T, an intersection shaped like a T, or a Y, an intersection shaped like a Y. All right, let's talk about signs. Words and/or numerals in quotation marks refer to words, numbers, or phrases written on non-temporary signs. All such signs will be clearly visible to participants traveling at rally speeds under rally conditions, and will be quoted exactly as they appear on the sign, but without regard to case sensitivity. So this instruction would be read as left at sign reading Main Street. Eligible signs. When a route instruction refers to a sign, the front of the sign may be perpendicular, parallel, or at any angle in between to the rally route. Therefore, participants may need to look to the side to see a reference sign, but will never need to look behind or backwards to see a sign used on the rally. So execution of route instructions. Each route instruction is to be executed at the first opportunity in ascending numerical order. Complete each route instruction fully before proceeding to the next. A mileage listed with a route instruction forms a mandatory part of the instruction. What that means, if you were looking for the instruction right at stop at 5 miles, and you got to a stop at 2 miles, you wouldn't be able to execute the right at stop at 5 miles there. You would continue on. So you have to be at the right mileage as well as have the right reference. So this tells us at each intersection, the rally route is determined by executing the next unexecuted numbered route instruction, or at intersections at which the next unexecuted numbered route instruction may not be executed, participants will determine the correct route by using the default route instructions described in Appendix A to these general instructions. So let's look at the default route instructions. When participants encounter an intersection on the rally route at which they may not execute the next numbered route instruction, the route to follow leaving that intersection is determined by applying the following default route instructions. Participants must apply these instructions discretely in ascending numerical order until encountering the lowest numbered instruction that eliminates all but one possible route leaving the intersection. So let's start looking at those. The first default route instruction is onto toward. We apply onto toward if it defines a single eligible route that either we've been placed onto a road name or number, or we've been placed toward a geographical feature or some kind. So let's walk through an example of that. We start down here and we're coming up this road and we're looking for this instruction, right onto Main. We get to this intersection, we see this road is indicated as Main, so we go right onto Main here. So now we start looking for instruction 13, right at a T. We get up to this intersection. This intersection is not an intersection shaped like a T, so we can't execute the instruction here. So which way do we go? Well, since instruction 12 placed us onto Main, and there's a single route leaving the intersection identified as Main, we would follow the onto and continue here. Then as we get to this intersection, which does have the shape of a T, we can execute the right at T here and continue on this way. Because we've executed an instruction following the creation of the onto that has a direction in it, the right at T, the onto condition no longer exists once we execute instruction 13. So if onto and toward, either we haven't been placed onto or we haven't been placed toward, or onto and toward doesn't define a single route leaving the intersection, we ignore that default route instruction and go on to the next, which is protection. And protection is telling us we use that if it defines a single route leaving the intersection without a stop or yield sign on it. So some examples. At this intersection, again, we're approaching from the base. We get up here and we say, is there a single route leaving the intersection without a stop or yield sign on it? And there is, so we would proceed to the left. We come up again from the base. We say, is there a single route leaving the intersection without a stop or yield sign on it? And there is, so we proceed to the right. We get to this intersection, and remember we have to look at onto and towards first, so we're assuming we haven't been placed onto or toward anything. We come up from the base. We say, is there a single route leaving the intersection without a stop or yield sign? And there is, so we take that route by proceeding straight. Then we get to this intersection, we're approaching from the base, and we say, have we been placed onto or toward? We have not. Is there a single route leaving the intersection without a stop or yield sign? And there is not, because both the left route and the right route do not have stop or yield signs. So onto and toward didn't define a way to go. Protection didn't define a way to go. So we have to look at the next default route instruction, which is centerline. Clearly defined as the single eligible route with a painted center line. So some examples. This intersection, we come from the base, we say we're not onto or toward. There isn't a single route without a stop or yield sign, but there is a single route with a painted center line, so that would be the way we go. We look at this intersection, we're not onto or toward. There isn't a single route without a stop or yield sign, but there is a single route with a painted center line, and that would be the way we go. We then get to this intersection and we say we're not onto or toward. There isn't a single route without a stop or yield sign, but there also isn't a single route without a single route with a painted center line. So therefore, none of those rules apply. We have to ask what the next one is. So after onto, toward, protection, center line, we get to straightest, which is very simply the straightest eligible route. So in this example, we're not onto or toward. There isn't a single route without a stop or yield sign. There isn't a single route with a center line, so we go straightest. At this intersection, there isn't a single route without a stop or yield sign. There isn't a single route with a center line, so again, we go straightest. It's not necessarily perfectly straight. At this intersection, we're not onto or toward. There isn't a single route without a stop or yield sign. There isn't a single route with a center line, so we proceed straightest, even though there's a slight turn to the road. So these are our default route instructions: onto, toward, protection, centerline, and straightest. So now you have the very basics of route following down. Remember, you're always going to execute the numbered route instruction if you can, and if you can't execute the numbered route instruction, you will fall to the default route instructions. While you're doing all this, of course, you're trying to stay on time and maintain the average speeds, so I would advise you to watch those speeds closely. During a regularity section, your concentration needs to be on the course and the timing if you want to do well. Some people suggest to drive 10% over the given speeds because while you're going through the course, you may come to sharp corners or a stop sign or something that causes you to have to go less than the average speed. So if when you're able to, you go a little higher than the average speed, the thought is that it averages out. Staying on course is absolutely critical to timing. You can be perfectly on time, but if you're not on the right road, you won't go past the checkpoint, and so therefore you won't get that good score for being perfectly on time. At times within the instructions, you'll be given a car 0 time. As you pass those references, you want to compare your time to those car 0 times to see how you're doing and determine if you're early or late. If you thought you were perfectly on time, but you're actually late, then you need to adjust how you're approaching the event to stay on time. Let's talk about some of the terms and definitions we use. We talk about regularity sections. Within these sections, you have to maintain time, and you're likely to be timed at a checkpoint or passage control. There'll only be one checkpoint or passage control per section. We also have what we call Monte Carlo sections. Monte Carlo sections may or may not be timed, but if they are timed, they're only timed at the end of the section. So you can drive any speed you want. The most important thing is to be at the end of this section exactly on time. We also have transit sections. There's no scoring opportunities in a transit section. You can leave the route to get gas or use the restroom or something like that during a transit. The only thing you need to keep in mind is at the end of the transit, you're probably starting another regularity, so you need to reach the end of the transit on time to start the next section on time. Other terms and definitions: there's a term itis, which is short for if there is such. And what we do is an itis instruction, we execute it if we find it before we find the following instruction. So let's walk through an example of that. Here we are, we're looking to go right at a sign reading Jones if there is such, and then we're looking for right at stop. So as soon as we completed the instruction before, instruction 9, we should start looking for a sign reading Jones, but we should also look for a stop. So let's start down here in the bottom left corner. We're coming up here, we get to this intersection, we haven't been placed onto or toward, there isn't a single route without a stop or yield sign. There's no sign Jones here, there's no stop here, so we can't execute any of the numbered route instructions. But what we do notice is that there's a center line to the right. So using our default route instruction of center line, we make this turn, we continue on, we're still looking for Jones and we're still looking for a stop. We don't see anything, and we get to a stop. Well, because we haven't seen Jones, and because Jones is labeled if there is such, we're able to skip instruction 10 because we found instruction 11 and we go right at stop and continue on. Now you might be wondering, well, okay, but why would the rally master do this? Well, a car less talented than you is coming up here and they get to this intersection and they forget about center line. So they just blow right past here and they keep going and they get up here and they say, oh look, right at Jones. So they execute instruction 10 by doing right at Jones here. They continue on, and then they execute instruction 11 by going right at stop here, and they continue, and now all the cars are back on the same route again. However, as you can see, they've taken a longer route than those of us that remembered how centerline works, so their timing is going to be a bit off. So we call this a trap. These kind of things exist in rallies sometimes. And the point here is that if you see an itis, it's almost a red flag suggesting there's some kind of trap going on. So keep that in mind. Other terms and definitions: SOL doesn't mean what you think it does. It means sign on left. We also use SOR for sign on right. If these are given, and they don't have to be, but if they are given, then the sign does have to be on that side of the road. So if you're looking for change average speed to 30 at sign reading Smith, SOL, and you see a sign reading Smith but it's on the right, that's not the right place to do the speed change. We also have SRIP for sign reading in part. Again, this doesn't have to be given. We can quote a portion of the sign at any time, but sometimes we'll call this out because it's a very large sign with a lot of writing and we want to call out that we're only quoting part of it. So here's some instructions. Let's walk through these instructions and see what we need to do. So we're going to leave here at 8 o'clock plus our car number. So if we were car number 3, we would leave here at 8:03. We'd zero our odometer. We'd be looking to go straight as possible at a blinker. And once we did that, we would start averaging 25 miles an hour. So here we are, we're at our blinker. We set our odometer to 0, and we're good to go. So we leave there, we're doing our 25 miles an hour, and we start looking for left. Left at Farmington should come up at about 0.15. So we approach this intersection. We look at our odometer, it's 0.15. We look at the sign, it says Farmington. So we're going to go left at sign reading Farmington, and we'll start averaging 42 miles an hour. Now that we've done that, we start looking for instruction 3, straight as possible at a blinker at about 1.05. Here we see our blinker. We come to this intersection. We find this is Woodbridge Road. So we execute our right at Woodbridge Road, and we start averaging 37 miles an hour. And we start looking to go left onto Burkhalter at 3.42. We approach this intersection. This shows us that Burkhalter is going to go to the left. So we execute our left onto Burkhalter. We start averaging 34 miles an hour, but remember the condition of onto has been created. So we start looking to observe a 90-degree left arrow, and as we're driving along, we approach this intersection. So we need to look closely to see if if it's necessary to follow the onto Burkhalter. We look more closely at the sign, and sure enough, Burkhalter is indicated as the road to the left. So we would go to the left following that onto Burkhalter, continuing to look for our observed 90-degree left arrow. After a bit, we see the 90-degree left arrow, so we execute that instruction. And then we look to end the practice regularity at a sign reading stop. Here we are, we're at the sign reading stop, so we end the section. So there, we've driven through a regularity section with some examples. We looked for mileage references, we averaged speeds, we had signs, we followed an onto, we applied our default route instructions. So that concludes today's Rally School. My name is Simon Levere. I'm the Rally Master for the event. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at rallymaster@classicmotorrally.org. I also need to mention that the rules of this event are called the general instructions. They're available on the website, and those rules take precedence over anything presented in the school today. The school today was designed to help novices and give you a general understanding of the rally and the way the event works, but nothing in this presentation should be considered eligible for protest or query against the event. The rules of the event apply, and those take precedence. Thanks for your attention, and I look forward to seeing you at the event. Goodbye.